平安。
Good afternoon, everyone. This is the sixth special session of the Special FC, and it's from 2:30 to 6:30, and there will be two sessions this afternoon. So please, so there'll be so this session will last from 2:30 to 4:50, and we are here to discuss the 2014-15 draft estimates to ensure that what the administration will be spending will not be exceeding what's needed. So in terms of the number of speakers, that will depend on the number of members requesting to speak. So please press the request to speak button if you want to speak. I'd also like to remind members that when you refer to replies by the administration, please do refer to the serial number of the reply. So on this occasion, it's LWB WW. And to facilitate the conduct of the meeting, we also have a PC in front of you, and you can search the reply. And the staff will also be showing the reply number on the screen. And if there is not adequate time for the officials to respond to your questions, you can follow up by raising written questions. First of all, I'd like to welcome the Secretary for Labour and Welfare for attending today's meeting, and they are here to answer questions in relation to women and welfare. And then for labour issues, those will be dealt with in the next session. I'll first invite the Bureau Director to make an opening statement. Over to you, Bureau Director. Good morning, good afternoon, Chairman and members. In 2014-15, government recurrent spending on social welfare and women's interests will reach $56.9 billion, accounting for 18.5% of the total recurrent government expenditure of the year, second only to education. Compared with the revised estimates for 2013-14, there is an increase by some $50 billion. There is or $5 billion, representing an increase by about 9.7%. This reflects the government's commitment to supporting the disadvantaged. The government will continue to provide and enhance our support to the disadvantaged, including the elderly, persons with disabilities, low-income families, and those in need. Let me highlight some of the salient points here. All along, the government attaches great importance to elderly services and allocates additional resources every year to enhance the standard and quality or quantity of care, and for recurrent expenditure that will reach about $6.2 billion, representing about 10.9% of the total recurrent government expenditure, or an increase of about 15% over the revised estimates of last year. In terms of community support and services for elderly, will be increasing our subvention to 211 elderly homes over the territory for employing more social workers to strengthen counseling services, enhancing information dissemination and handling of care need assessments and service applications for the elderly. We will also be enhancing support services for elderly persons with dementia and their carers, and we will also be adding some 1,500 enhanced home and community care services places, amounting to an increase of about 27% over the existing provision. And for the existing 5,000 plus EHCC places, that will also be strengthened. For example, we'll be providing more home-based on-site carer training so that frail elderly will be able to age in a community, and all these will amount to about $336 million. In terms of recurrent funding, for those frail elderly people who need institutional care, we will adopt a multi-pronged approach. We will have about 950 additional subsidized residential care places, and we will also be raising the unit subsidies of all the ward places under the enhanced ward place scheme and the nursing home place purchase scheme. We will also be extending the continuum of care arrangement to 6 subvented nursing homes and 5 new contract homes with a view to enhancing the service quality and strengthening the care for frail elderly. All these will involve an annual recurrent funding of some $325 million, and also with the money following the user approach, we will also be providing more diversified choices for the elderly persons. The government has also commissioned the Elderly Services or Elderly Commission to conduct a program, and with your support, we're going to create a post of AOSGC, that is a Principal Assistant Secretary Special Duties post in the Bureau, in order to provide dedicated support to the formulation of the program plan. And we are also looking at institutional care for the elderly. We are looking into this concept. We are also implementing this special scheme on privately owned sites for welfare services special scheme, in order to encourage non-NGOs with their own land to provide diversified services, in particular services for the elderly. And the special scheme will provide a concrete basis for planning of welfare facilities and manpower demand for elderly services in the medium to long term. With regard to the public transport fare concessions for the elderly and eligible persons with disabilities, which is very popular, there are further developments, and so far around 700,000 people are using them, and about 88% of them are made by elderly, and the remaining 80,000 trips are made by eligible persons with disabilities. We are preparing to extend the scheme to eligible children with disabilities aged below 12 next month, and to extend the scheme to green minibuses in phases starting from the first quarter next year. The Transport Department is exploring with the GMB Trade and the Octopus Cards Limited to resolve the technical, operational, accounting and auditing issues and the expenditure involved starting from the first quarter next year. And of course, we will also be looking at the expenditure that might be incurred. We are also concerned about rehabilitation and support services for persons with disabilities and their carers, and we have a number of new initiatives. Number one, in terms of funding, if you just look at the LWB and our services, we have not taken into account cash subsidy, i.e. Disability allowance and so on, and also the rehab bus services provided by the Transport Department. Just these two programs adding together, in 2007-08, that is during the last term of government, we started with $2.8 billion and now is close to $4.3 billion, an increase by about 50%. And this year, we're going to increase that by about $800 million. In other words, there will be an increase of about 19% over 2013-14. And we propose to increase funding by $360 million from 2014-15 onwards for the continued improvement and enhancement of rehabilitation services for persons with disabilities in order to facilitate their integration into community. This includes making available $152 million to regularize 3 community care fund programs, including providing training subsidy for children with disabilities from low-income families, thereby enabling them to receive self-financing services while waitlisting for subvented preschool rehabilitation services, and offering subsidies to persons with severe physical disabilities living in a community for renting medical equipment and acquiring medical consumables. Bureau Director, because we don't have enough time for you to read out all the 33 paragraphs in your opening statement. So can you be more succinct in your statement? All right. I'll summarize that then. In fact, the written statement is already very lengthy. That's why if you read out all the 33 paragraphs, that will take a long time. So can you just highlight some of the salient points, because you have already spent some 7 minutes on your opening statement. All right, I'll succinctly summarize that. So in terms of social welfare, we will continue to make available resources to provide a safety net, and also in terms of low-income families, we will also be providing comprehensive care, so that we are working out the details so that later next year we will also be doing this. And also we have the Child Development Fund. We have set aside $300 million for the injection, and also for the special scheme on the site. This is also one of the bright spots, and if we are going to do it comprehensively, that would also substantially increase the supply, so that there will be 17,000 places. This is quite a breakthrough, because we're talking about some 9,000 places for elderly services, and 8,000 would be for rehabilitation services. So I'll stop here, and I'll take I'll try to exchange views with members. All right, we can now start. 4 minutes for both questions and answers. First, Mr. Tan Ka Biu. Thank you, Chairman. I think the community is most concerned about the low-income working family subsidy, or the LIFA. Well, according to the administration, apparently that can only be done by the end of this year, the earliest. But then many residents are actually 4P families as cited by the chief executive, and they are having a family income of about $14,400. But then the chief executive was using the figure for 2012. It's already 2014 April. So my question is, as of now and also by the end of this year, so should we be using the 2013 figure? If that is the case, then at this very moment, do you know what exactly should be the income limit using the example cited by the chief executive, 2 adults and 2 children? And also for 200 hours or 208 hours, they will only be eligible for the $1,000 subsidy. And many trade unions have a lot of reservation about this. We should adopt the 44-hour standard working hours approach. So 176 would mean that they would be eligible. So after taking into account this, will you be making adjustment? And next, question 0068 for the private housing subsidy and people using this not being able to afford to pay the rent. All right, so the increase has been from 51% going up to 56%. And question 284, you said that well, for the concessionary fare for public transport, you said that nothing can be done about it. So Kaito would not be eligible. I think it's also licensed by the Transport Department, and in terms of fare, it's also regulated because for people living in Potoi Island, they are not eligible for the $2 fare, but then they will also have to take Kaitos in order to buy their groceries. So how are you going to help them? Well, when we launch the program, you're talking about the LIFA. We will have to look at the latest figure. So it's not, we are not going to use 2012. It's only for reference because the chief executive referred to that. But that's because that was the base year for calculating the subsidy. And according to the figure that we have, well, for the 2013, we may not have got hold of them yet. But then I understand that it would definitely be over 14,000. It's about 16,000 according to the latest figures that I got. Well, for the actual figure, I'll have to look at the CNS department because every quarter they are adjusting it. That's why we will have to look at the latest figure and then we will be able to calculate the latest figure. So rest assured, we will do that. So will that be eroded by inflation? Don't worry about this because we'll be looking at the latest figure and we will adjust that accordingly. So that will be the basis. But then every year we're going to make an annual adjustment. Second, about working hours. Well, there might be this misgiving, thinking that this is very harsh, requiring people to work very long hours. So I think there is a misunderstanding because for the 144 hours, actually, basically it should be okay because most workers have already exceeded that number. So it's basically a very lax requirement. But then the reason why we have imposed this, that's because we encourage people to work more and earn more. For example, for people in the catering sector and people working as security guards, basically they work long hours. They are also self-reliant. How about 176 hours, $1,000, and then 206 hours, 208 hours at $1,200? Well, as I said, this is something brand new. We have never tried that before. And in terms of government recurrent expenditure, we are talking about $3 billion. Is quite a substantial figure. And adopting our current design and also our proposal right now for any change that might be included, that would increase our spending. So I think we should be more pragmatic. We should kickstart the program, and then there will be another review very shortly. Okay, so we have to wait for another round. Next. Emily Lau, Deputy Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. Reply number 278 is about transport services for the disabled. Well, I'm concerned about rehab bus. All right, we only have about 100 or so. And if you look at Head 186, well, for the scheduled services is about 186 and 80, and for the dial ride is about 30. And well, for scheduled buses is for commuting, and then for dial ride is for taking part in social activities. For the scheduled services, you will have to wait for 2 months. So how can it be the case. So for people who want to use this service, how can you expect them to wait for 2 months before they can get a bus to go to work or school? And then for Dial a Ride, you are not able to tell us exactly how long they will have to wait. You said that about 10% or so will not be able to get the service. So is it the way to provide the service? How can you help them integrate into the community? In fact, according to your estimate, how many people are in need of a service?
If I may refer to the figures, the number of people served, over 300,000 for SR and over 400,000 for DAR. But how many people have failed to book the service so that they cannot even go out? Secretary, we're also very concerned about the disabled, and we hope that they can integrate into society. Therefore, there will be an addition of 6 rehab buses from a fleet of 135 to 141. If you look at 0708, there were only 95, and over the past few years, we have been adding 46 rehab buses. No, I'm asking how many people cannot get the service? Do you have the information, or is it that you just couldn't care? I think the Commissioner for Transport has the figures. Yeah, the question was asked this morning. With regard to SR, 60 people are in the waiting list. In February 2014, new rehab buses have been added to the fleet, and the number will go down to 30-something. We understand that every year there will be new applicants. So by the end of 2014, the number may go up again. But as the Secretary said, in 2014-15, there will be addition of new buses. As for the SR or DAR, in 2013, people who have failed to book the service stood at 12.5%. How many people, in other words? Can you give us a figure? Chairman, can I give you the figure after the meeting? Well, I don't know why you are so unprepared when you come to special FC meetings. Chairman, there are some taxis in the market which are tailor-made for the disabled, but they are expensive. Why don't you try to think horizontally and give people more opportunity? The Commissioner said only 60 people are in the line waiting for the service. Now, of course, you can say some people are not even waiting. They are not in the queue. Would it be that tens of thousands of disabled people are kept at home because they do not have transportation? Do you know what the situation is like? Do you also encourage the taxis for the disabled to develop further so that people have a choice? Do you have the intention to do that? Let me answer the question. I can give the figure to Ms. Emily Lau. There are 13,635 cases which have failed to book the service. Ms. Lau talked about taxis which allow the wheelchair-bound to take their service. We have an open mind towards this service. If the service operator is interested in expanding the service, we would be quite happy to welcome it. Well, maybe people just cannot afford the taxis, and there are over 10,000 people who have failed to book the service. I think that is an underestimation. I hope you will try to find the resources to take care of these people. Next member, Ms. Helena Wong. Thank you, Chairman. Can I refer to question 264 about childcare services? I think I have talked about this many times. According to your answer, I was asking about the places of different kinds of childcare services and people who are waiting for the service. In your reply, you said that the SWD does not keep any waiting list for the above-mentioned services. But you also say that the overall provisions can meet the demand. I want to know why you do not have a waiting list for the services, and yet you say that the overall provisions can meet the demand. I mean, there is a conflict between the two. It is not logical for you to come to that conclusion. I asked that question earlier on in a council meeting. According to your figures, actually there is 100% usage rate in with regard to the independent childcare centers. That is why I'm asking this question. If you do not have a waiting list, why can you say the demand has been met? But I'm happy to see that the subsidized independent childcare centers has been increased. Now there are 722 instead of 690. But the Democratic Party has asked you to increase the number to 1,000, in other words, an addition of 310. Now you have only allowed 32 to be included. I'd like to know, on what basis did you decide to add 32 additional places? In Note 1, in the annex to the reply, you say that these would be provided in 4 existing aided standalone CCCs in Eastern, Central, and Western, Kowloon City and Yaochim Wang districts. I'd like to know, how come you decided to add places to these 4 centers in these districts? Why not add them for Sham Shui Po, for example? And new arrival women asked members this question recently. They say that they have been smeared and are called locusts, and that they are suffering from discrimination. People say they are lazy bones once they come to Hong Kong, but they are fighting back. They say actually they want to join the workforce. It is just that nobody cares for their children. Okay, I think they can answer the question. So, Secretary, how can you know you are meeting demand? Thank you. Earlier on, when we answered the question at the council meeting, we already said that indeed we have not included any expansion for aided standalone CCCs. But if you look at the figures, if you look at KG cum CCC, there are many places, and that is why even if the figure has not been increased, we have indeed included 32 additional places. I can ask the director to say why they have been added to those 4 CCCs. The member asked about not keeping waiting lists for aided standalone CCCs. In fact, we have a plan to add places wherever we can find the places. As for KG cum CCCs, the usage rate stands at 77%. So there is still capacity. As for the districts, it depends on the operators in those districts to see whether they have the manpower and how they arrange services. We have been keeping a lookout for such places. Next one, Mr. Wang Kwok Heng. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask about 256, please, about support for men. We understand that there have been more support for men, but even now, you are still not placing enough emphasis on men. If we go from a gender mainstreaming point of view, I cannot see any support from the government for men. As you know, in a post-industrial era, men are in a weak position. We have the higher suicide rate, we have more incidents of cancer, and we have a shorter lifespan. A recent study shows that out of 1,500 street sleepers in Hong Kong, most of them are men. And with regard to diseases suffered by men, there is no dedicated support. If we look at social welfare spending, Secretary, can you answer me as to which one is in support of men? None. Do you spend a penny on men? No. Even if you look at the title, you talk about welfare and women. This is the title for this session. That goes to show there is no support for men. So I now give you more time for you to answer my question. If we look at NGOs, because there is no funding from the government for services for men, the service has been truncated. Characters has told me that situation. You cannot see you placing any emphasis on men. I think that's regrettable. Secretary, thank you for the question. In terms of welfare spending, we are very fair. You say we have no welfare for men. That is not a fact. Men can enjoy and use all services. Men and women are equal in terms of service provision. And the Social Security funding is the same for men and women. You refer to that question. In fact, we have stated that in special circumstances, services are provided for men. And even if you talk about domestic violence, we understand sometimes men are victims as well, and we serve them as well. We don't give less emphasis on men. If that's the case, my follow-up question is, why is it that sometimes some NGOs do not have dedicated funding for services for men, so those services are truncated? And you say domestic violence, male victims are also supported. I'd like to ask you what you are doing for men. There are sheltered housing for women victims, but men can only go to McDonald's and become street sleepers. Do you know about this situation? Well, in terms of men, let me be frank with you. If you are a victim of domestic violence, you have the same category of NGOs providing sheltered workshops for you, like family crisis support centers and operated by characters. Even men can enjoy those services. You talked about the truncation of certain services. Please give me the information after the meeting so I can help those NGOs concerned. Can you give a list of the NGOs concerned? Yes, I will do that after the meeting. Secretary, why don't you give me a direct answer? Yes, you say men can also use social services, but I cannot see one where men are served. Just list one service. Now, the Secretary has already mentioned Characters Family Crisis Support Center. I also talked about Social Security funding. The amount given to men and women is the same. And if you are a victim of domestic violence, NGOs also provide the service. I think you can give a list of such NGOs to Mr. Wang so he knows where to get help. Mr. Pun Xiuping. Thank you, Chairman. I have two categories of questions. One, question 183. The CFA has said that people should be eligible for CSSA after 1 year. If I may refer to your reply in 2014-15, it is expected that you are going to spend the same as the year before. Your reason is that there is a slight decrease in CSSA cases, so the two can be offset. I'd like to know more. Do you have relevant information to show that your decision is correct? Why can't you have more accurate estimation? You should be able to get information about new arrivals. Number two, 185, the special scheme for using private sites for welfare users. You say that there are 5 such plans that can be completed within 3 years, and 58 projects may have to wait till after 2017-18, and these will be completed in phases. I'd like to ask whether you can expedite the progress. And secondly, have you estimated what will happen to the NGOs if your approval rate is too slow? Any assessment done? Secretary, thank you for the questions. First of all, the CFA's judgment reached on the 17th of December last year that the eligibility for CSSA is now different. We are still watching progress carefully. In the reply, in fact, if we talk about the latest figures, we have received 4,007 cases as at the 31st of March, 1/3 from single parents, and we have already approved over 80% of the cases. According to our present estimate, that is the case, but we can wait for more figures before we can come to a more balanced assessment. In fact, after a few days, the judgment was made. There was a day when the number of applications reached 170, but now it has dropped to about 20 to 30 daily. Therefore, our estimate is such that there will be an eventual 6,000 to 7,000 cases. But we still have to watch how things develop, and so we can have more objective figures. Secondly, you mentioned the special scheme to use privately owned sites for welfare users. I will defer to the director, but I have to say that this is for the medium and long term. There are 5 projects which are more solid because the preparation and the process is advancing well. So we are happy to say that we are confident they can be completed in 2017-18.
Permanent Secretary, well, as the Bureau Director said, some of these are redevelopment plans or conversion plans and so on, and different projects would involve different procedures. Some would require a feasibility study, others will have to apply to the TPP, and some would also have to modify the lease terms. That's why the progress would be somewhat different with different schemes. But then rest assured, we are very positive, and we are taking this up with many NGOs. In particular, we are talking to the Planning Department, the Lands Department, and also the Architectural Services Department, and also the Buildings Department on the details. We'll try our best to help these organizations to complete the construction as soon as possible. And also, these projects are not going to affect their other projects, so they will be dealt with separately, and we're also going to help them to expedite the progress. Next, Peter Cheung. Well, in the opening statement, para 30, he talked about $470 million additional funding for the NGOs, and he also referred to paramedical services and also other spending. But I'd like to know a bit more. For the $470 million, how would that be distributed amongst the 3 areas? Can you give us a breakdown? Because one of the areas referred to would be food costs. For some organizations, if they do not provide food services, then will you be giving them less? So would that be evenly distributed or unevenly distributed? That's point number 1. And another one is in para 29, is about human resources in care services. As we all know, with an aging population, there are more elders in a community, and also for rehabilitation services would also increase, and as a result we need to have more staff in this sector. So in the next 10 years, well, for physiotherapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, and also nurses, how many more do we need? What is the demand? And also, how are we able to ensure that there will be sufficient trained staff for those areas? And in point 3, you talk about increasing funding for elderly services units. So I'd like to know, all right, you've given them the money, and we have the lump sum grant, and if they do not recruit more people, then how are you able to ensure that you'll be able to monitor what they're going to do? All right, I'll try to answer the second question, and then I'll ask the director to answer the first and third question, because both are related. In terms of human resources, we are concerned about this. That's why we have also started this elderly services program plan that would provide a very solid basis for us to plan the premises and also the manpower. And we have also started with the special scheme. 63 sites and 17,000 places will be made available, and that would also form a very good basis as to what kind of manpower we need in order to match the number of places. And therefore we have the hardware, and then we can match that with the relevant software, and therefore the Elderly Commission is working with the LWB on that. And in the process, we will also have to liaise closely with the Food and Health Bureau, because they're also looking into healthcare and also allied healthcare professionals. So we will have to work together. You talk about physiotherapists, occupational therapists, and also registered nurses and so on. So we will take 2 years to come up with this program plan, and then we'll have the blueprint as to how it's going to work. And also for manpower requirement, we will also be talking to the UGC and also the tertiary institutions as to how we can train up sufficient people for the task. I'd like to interrupt here. Well, we understand that 2 years down the road, well, UGC is talking about a triennium planning. So I'm concerned that you may not be able to catch up with the need. Well, even today, we know that there are many areas which are short of staff, and therefore we are asking the UGC to provide more subvention for the universities to train up the much needed people. So please don't wait 2 years. Well, I'll answer the question and then I'll ask the director to supplement. It's not that we are not aware of that, but then we are trying to do it more comprehensively. This year, we have already reflected that to the Education Bureau and also the UGC in which areas we need more people. And we've also talked to the PolyU. There are some short-term courses. There are also some top-up degrees, and they would also offer some master degree places. So I'll defer to the director, and then I'll answer later. Time's up. Mr. Leung Yiu Chung. Chairman, I'd like the Bureau Director to tell us more as to how they're going to help the elders, in particular those with hearing impairment. How can they go into RHEs? Because they have hearing impairment and there are no RHEs to help these people, and as a result, they can only scatter. They are now staying in different elderly homes, and we don't have any sign interpreters, and therefore they are living or leading a very lonely life, and therefore they have a lot of hardship. I've also talked to the director about their problems, and during this year, are you going to increase the resources to help them, or what are you going to do in order to help them so that they don't need to lead a lonely life? And next is about childcare services. In Para 25, you said that this year your service targets will increase the age limit from 6 to 9. So for children under 9, they will be eligible. So how did you come up with this 9 instead of 12, for example? Bureau Director, for elders with hearing impairment and on RCHEs for them, we are concerned about this. That's why we are putting a lot of resources for welfare services. It's not just about subsidized homes. Actually, even for board place private homes, we have also increased our funding for that, and the purpose is to enable them to increase manpower and resources in order to take care of these elders with special needs, in particular those with hearing impairment. You also talk about childcare services. Indeed, we'll be putting in more places, we'll be putting in more resources so that at the front line we can increase the number of places, for example, childhood support, childcare project, and so on. Well, how did we come up with the age limit of 9? Why not 12 then? Well, actually, generally speaking, well, in the average families, in particular for those who are taken care by the neighborhood support childcare project, actually for after school assistance, well, sometimes these nannies cannot help, but then by the age of 12, it's not just about taking care, it's about helping them with their extracurricular needs, and therefore we try to draw a line there, and we draw the line at 9, and then the director can also supplement. Yes, Director? Well, just now the Bureau Director talked about why we draw the line at 9. That's about providing better child care, and then for people reaching 12, they are already high school students, and then from 6 to 12, then we are talking about more grown-up children. And then in terms of after-school care, in the coming year, we have enhanced that service. So we have extended that service so that instead of just weekday evenings, we are actually extending it to 9 o'clock, and then during weekends, the service would also be available. And in terms of the fee waiver, we're also going to increase that by 360 places, so that both in terms of childcare services and also for more grown-up children, in terms of after-school care, we're going to expand the service. And also for the helping the needy scheme, well, this is the partnership scheme, and we'll be increasing funding by $400 million, so that there can be more holistic development, and there would also be more after-school support, so that for young, small children and also high school children and so on, there will be more support. So for elders with hearing impairment, what kind of support will be provided to them? Well, other than improving the quality, well, that's a bit abstract. But then we'd like to ensure that they can go into a few or a handful of homes, so that they can share the places with those with similar needs. So can you improve that? Yes, you supplement later. Next, Albert Ho. Well, my question is in relation to mental health ICCMW. Reply number 103. And other related question is reply number 137. So if you look at the two replies and questions, we understand that there are 24 centers and 11 are permanent ones, and they scatter in 15 districts. And of course, some are under renovation and some are still identifying. Well, you're in the process of identifying a site for that. So how come we only have 11 permanent homes? For the rest, why are they temporary? So for how long do they have to remain temporary? And when will you be able to identify permanent sites for them? And also, in terms of manpower or the establishment for these homes, can you tell us for case managers, well, how many are there? And other than case managers, what other related services are being provided? For example, do they have, well, how many community care nurses are there? How many of them, how many psychiatrists are there, or psychologists are there? Because in meeting with the need, if you want to meet a case manager, how long does it take? I'll defer to the director. Yes, director. Thank you, Chairman. Concerning the 24 centers, it's not that only 11 have a permanent site. Actually, for homes that are operating on permanent sites, there are 11, and then for the remaining ones, they have already identified a permanent site and works are going on, and one has already identified the site. They are now conducting district-based consultation and is still in progress, and 2 have already identified permanent sites, and they have successfully won the support from the local residents. So what's left is there are 5 that have yet to find a permanent site, and we are still working on that. For those that have yet to identify a permanent site, you don't have to worry about that, because they are using government resources and they are funded in hiring commercial premises as their temporary basis, and they are already providing the services. And for these centers, as I just said, well, for the services that are being provided, they are very broad, because they are provided in the form of an integrated center, for example, early intervention, day training, counseling, and so on. With regard to every center's establishment, the number of nurses, and for how long it will take for them to meet with their case managers, well, individual centers might vary, and if you need the details, we can provide that later. Well, for a case manager, on average, how many cases do they have to deal with? And also for individual center, can you provide the figures? Well, with regard to the establishment, so do you have that with you? And if you don't, then you can also provide that in writing later. Yes, we'll provide that later. Another one which is related, reply number 113. Is about the number of mental patients seeking help or consultation. There are many young patients, and for the newly added, many of them are from 6 to 12 or 13 to 18. So this is really very worrying. How come the situation is so serious? And also, on average, they will have to wait for 19 weeks before they can get the first consultation. So my question is, do you know, in terms of follow-up consultation, how long would it take? What is the interval for the second or follow-up consultation? Well, for the waiting time for follow-up consultation is scheduled by the HA, so we can get hold of the information and then we can give it to members. All right, can you also provide this piece of information? Well, what are their problems mainly? So what kind of psychiatric problems do they have? Can you also provide the information? Yes, we'll get the HA to reply. Next, Alice Mack. Chairman, I'd like to ask 179 is about the HCC. Well, in many districts, the figures vary. In Tsuen Wan, there are only 40 plus, but then in the islands, 130 plus. So it's about HCC. So what is your estimate or what is your assessment? Well, in Tsuen Wan, do you think the service is already adequate? And how can you increase that? And also in terms of the charges, they vary, ranging from $18 to $24. So can the administration consider, with regard to this award, can you encourage more women to take part in this? Well, of course, the Bureau Director has said time and again that this is very much a volunteer service, but then we should provide some incentive to the women who take part in this, because that is also one form of recognition. So can you increase the amount of honorarium to them, and also 180?
增加138個公務員職位啦，咁有120個就愛嚟做一啲綜援啊同埋公共福利。
It is said that with regard to the Social Security Division, there would be an addition of 180 posts. I believe you are talking about people looking after the OH allowance, etc. But with regard to the PCSSA and also the OH allowance, I can see this about our frontliners. I'm asking this question because our frontliners are working flat out. Under each scheme, you are going to add manpower, but whether it be inquiries from residents or applicants, making applications, a lot of help is needed from your frontliners. I believe their workload exceeds what was originally anticipated. You have 120 people adding for these new programs. I'd like to know whether this is enough. And also, how many of them are NCSCs? Out of these 138 posts, would they be able to occupy some of these? I will answer the first question. With regard to home-based child carers, the basic requirement is 40 for each district. But we encourage the NGOs to look after the people according to the actual need. But basically, there must be at least 40. And therefore, you can see that in the reply as well. You asked whether there could be more funding. I asked that actually it is not a kind of wage, but a kind of incentive. However, we have heard a lot from you, and therefore, while we want to release more work capacity of women, we are looking into this HCC to see whether there is room for improvement. Thank you. Director, can I talk about the 130 posts created for the Social Security Division? We are talking about civil service posts. There are no NCSCs within this 138. We understand that our frontliners are under a heavy workload. At the beginning, the workload tends to be larger, but all in all, the workload will come down to a reasonable level. Apart from creating of posts, we have also done a lot to streamline frontline work. Say, for example, non-emergency home visits, we are delaying them, and we are also streamlining our work procedures. We understand that it is hard on the frontliners. I think the director has misunderstood my question. Sorry, your time is up. But she's not answering my question. Never mind. Queue up again. Dr. Fernando Zhang. One of the big problems with our social welfare provision is that we lack planning. We have an aging population and society is changing all the time, but services are not catching up. All these years, we have asked the administration to do an overall planning, but the administration has refused. And finally, today, the administration says that we are going to do some planning about services for the elderly. That is good. But you cannot just focus on the elderly, especially when you are talking about long-term care. We said many times that the concept of long-term care does not only apply to elderly people. We are also talking about the disabled and the chronically ill. You should not set a cut-off age at 65. That is quite artificial. Okay, you are not going to look at other parts. You are only looking at the elderly. You are not doing anything about the rehabilitation plan. I'm talking about question 012. I think basically you have not answered my question. With regard to 77, I'm talking about home care for the severely disabled. You say you will now promote it, but compared to the integrated home service of disabled people, this is not the same because there will not be a meal on wheel service and no home cleaning service. Some disabled people are refused the integrated home care service, and they say that they will receive service only for the severely disabled. But then there will not be a meal on wheel and will not be home cleaning. And also question 281, rehab bus, as asked by Ms. Emily Lau. Last year, over 13,000 cases have been refused. But what is worrying is that about 55% or 7,000 cases, those are requests for going to a doctor. In other words, people need medical attention, and so they tried to dial a service on the rehab bus, but they were refused. We are not talking about taking a tour or trying to see a movie. They are going to see the doctor. And the numbers in this category are going up. Every year you add a few more rehab buses. But now the disabled cannot even get the service to see a doctor. What are your plans to improve the situation? Chairman, I will answer the second question and I'll defer to the director. On home service for the severely disabled, we understand there is a big demand for rehab bus service. That is why in the last 6 years we have added 40 rehab buses. Instead of 95, now we have 141. We know there is the need. That is why we are going to continue to get resources to try to solve the problem at source. Now I'll defer to the director. Can I please ask the Deputy Director to answer the question? In terms of home service, we have done some consolidation. Let me defer to the Deputy Director. Starting from this month, we have regularized the home care service for severely disabled people. As the members said, that will include escort service, rehabilitation therapy, and occupational therapy and personal care. As for Meal on Wheel, we are aware that some service users do require that service. When we designed the service, we relied on a pilot done, and this has been regularized, and this has just been launched, and we are going to watch the situation and gauge the demand for Meal on Wheels. Case managers can make the relevant arrangements, but in the long term, we'll have to see how we can strengthen the service. But that is a loophole. Sorry, your time is up. Next, Mr. Tam Yu Chung. Chairman, I'm talking about transport fare concession for elderly people and also disabled people who are eligible. It's very popular. But many elderly people are waiting for the concession to be extended to the GMBs. They would like that to be kick-started ASAP. In Para 7, the Secretary said that starting from the first quarter of next year, GMBs will be included in the concessionary plan in phases. So that is 1 year from now. We are still in the first quarter of this year. And you are talking about a year later. And that will be done in phases. And if you read on, I am afraid it would even be later. It says it is going to be done in phases starting from the first quarter of next year. And then it will further explore into the technical, operational, accounting and audit issues. So is it that starting from next year you are going to explore into the issues? In other words, people are not going to wait a year, but probably 2 years or 3 years. Is that the case? And why? Let me kickstart, and then the Commissioner for Transport can add. Our timetable is that we are going to launch the program starting from the first quarter of 2015 in phases. In other words, we are going to include GMB service in phases starting from the first quarter of next year. We also want to act fast. But as I said in para 7, there are many technical problems. We are talking about over 3,000 GMBs involving 150 operators. They have different modes of operation and accounting modes, and there are over 100 routes. And we have to do a lot with the computer software and hardware. The TD is now having an active discussion with the Trade Commissioner. As the Secretary said, GMB operators have different accounting procedures. And their octopus readers belong to different generations. Not every GMB on every route can be included in the plan, because after all, this plan is going to be subsidized by public money, and they would have to have proper accounting procedures for auditing to be done. Therefore, operators have to update the technical side of their operation so that their accounting procedures are acceptable to the administration, so that we can reimburse them. We are assisting the trade to do this. And we have been having meetings with the operators, telling them of our requirements. We understand some operators are larger and they have proper procedures already, and I believe these can take part starting from the first stage. We'd like to help the operators to be included ASAP. Mr. Frederick Fong, may I refer to paras 22 and 23 of the speech? This is about LEVA. When the Subcommittee on Poverty of LegCo had a meeting with the Secretary, it said that according to the Commission on Poverty of the administration, if low-income families also have elderly people or disabled people, they are regarded as poor families. But in fact, you only accept families with children. You say because the disabled and elderly people also have allowances. And in fact, these can be calculated according to or calculated into the family income, and then you can subject them to income audit. And now you only allow children to be included, but not the elderly. I believe you are or can be accused of age discrimination. Can you reconsider this? Number 2, last time at the subcommittee meeting, you said this could be launched only in the first quarter of next year. I think we have been hearing about it, but it could be 1.5 years later before we can have it in reality. Well, in that period of time, you can already manufacture an aeroplane. That is quite unacceptable. The SWD already has its own investigative procedure. Is it that you need to have more people so you can launch the system faster? If you don't want to use the SWD mechanism, why don't you start a new one? Secretary, we explain every time that the positioning of the policy matters. We want to promote self-reliance, and the harder you work, the more you get. And we are also tackling intergenerational poverty. You don't have to repeat this. You just tell me why you don't accept elderly people. Well, you have answered your own question. There are 420,000 elderly people who are getting an allowance, and many people are also getting disabled allowance as well. We are also reviewing the definition of the disability allowance. So we want to tackle 2 things under LEVA, and that is intergenerational poverty and also self-reliance. No, you are not answering my question. The thing is, the children also get allowances for textbooks, for example. Why don't you calculate the elderly allowances into the income? If together with the allowance they are still a low-income family, why don't you include them? Well, as I said, the policy tackles two issues. One, low-income working families. If they have a lot of children, so you will have age discrimination. No, as I said, elderly people already have their OAA and other allowances. You haven't answered my question on efficiency. Well, I understand that you are concerned about the timing. We also want to act fast. That is why we hope that within this legislative session, we can come back to the Finance Committee.
And only with approval will we be able to start with the advanced work, for example, recruitment of people, computer hardware and software. This is a major project. This is not an ordinary project. We are talking about recurrent spending of about $3 billion and some 700,000 people benefiting. So it's not a simple one-off program. It's a recurrent program, and therefore both hardware and software have to be in place. But then we'll strive to get it up and rolling as soon as possible. Next, Sin Chung Kai. He's not there. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Chairman. Reply number 275. Is about HMH, hostels for moderately mentally handicapped and also hostels for severely mentally handicapped. The waiting time is very long, 5 and 7 years respectively. So can I ask the Secretary, what can you do to shorten the waiting time? Because we do understand that for these people and their parents, they are actually subject to a lot of stress. So my first question, can he answer the question first? Yes, we are also very concerned about this. We are doing a number of things. Number one, during this term of government, we will provide some 6,200 places, and 2,000 plus would be residential care services. In particular, we'd like to look at 3 disaster zones, so to speak. You talk about severely mentally handicapped, and second, moderately mentally handicapped, and also for the severely physically handicapped, the waiting time is 20 plus months, and for the others, we are talking about over 18 months. It's very long, and therefore we have this major project. We hope to start it as soon as possible. That is at Siu Lam, that is Castle Peak Road, 16.5 miles. We are conducting a feasibility study. It's just technical. So it's about the number of places to be provided, but then we hope to be able to provide 1,150 places in that location, so that before the end of the term of the government, we will be able to rebuild it, because we will have to redevelop the site. And there are 3 categories. One would be moderately mentally handicapped, severely mentally handicapped, and also severely physically handicapped. And in Kwun Tong, the Kai Nang Center is also to be redeveloped. And before the change of government, we also hope to have over 3,000 places for the needy persons. And then for the medium to long term, we have this special scheme of privately owned places for welfare uses, and 8,000 would be for rehabilitation, and 2,000 plus would be residential care. And we will also give priority to these categories, so that more facilities and more places will be dedicated for these, in order to ease the waiting time. Yes, Bureau Director, for the series of measures, how long will it take? 2, 3, or 4 years for Siu Lam and Kai Nang? We hope to be able to do that within our term, that is before 2017, because we have already started the ball rolling. We have all the planning and works are underway. And then for the medium to long term, I think it will take 5 to 10 years, because we have already started them in phases. We're talking about 21st of February. Thank you for your approval. So $10 billion to the lottery fund, so that we can have sufficient resources for the several dozen projects to get started. And then after they have been rolled out, I will be able to provide the facilities. I have a second question. Reply 274. So, and also reply 67, a question asked by Chen Yun Han, is about CSSA fraud cases. Well, if you look at the numbers, they are somewhat different. Well, in 274, you said that for substantiated fraud cases, 117 in 2013. But then in your reply to Ms. Chen Yunhan's question, well, in 67 is 1219 instead of 1117. So I'd like to ask this. Well, in out of the 1,117, well, 200 plus have been convicted. So are the penalties able to achieve a deterrent effect? Because they should have this social conscience and a sense of responsibility. They should all come back out to work. So what is the situation like? Well, for those that have been substantiated, we'll refer the cases to the police, and then after prosecution is taken out, in terms of the penalty, the court has meted out a rather severe sentencing. So in investigating such fraud cases, we have attached a lot of importance to them, and we will also review the cases on a regular basis so that we will make sure that every case will be looked at once every few years. Ms. Chen Yunhan. Chairman, I have many questions, but then I'll ask just two. In fact, they are about certain figures. Well, one is related to reply number 0156 and 0059. Okay, if you look at the number in 2013, we are talking about the waiting time for elderly services. Well, for elders waiting for elderly services, well, if you look at the number of people who die before they get a place, well, over 2,000 if you look at the two replies. And if you look at the waiting time, we're talking about 35 to 36 months. We have asked this many times, and yet it has not been dealt with. Yes, I understand that it's difficult for the administration to provide elderly services. I really hope that you'll be very careful. We are talking about some 1,000 elders, and many people are still waiting, and you have 5,000 dying every year. So you have to think about it more carefully in planning for such services. Do you have any fallback plan? And also, in the face of these problems, other than building more homes, yes, I understand that the Deputy Secretary has been working very hard in identifying sites, but then do you have interim measure? You're talking about 5,000 elders who die before getting a place. All right, for community nannies and so on, they do not necessarily have to go into one of those homes. Well, you've been advocating that people should be able to age in a community. All right. So for such HCCs, they can also take care of elders. They can escort them to see a doctor and so on. So why are you not able to do that? You're such a smart person. You should have known that these homes are not able to be completed on time. So 5,000 actually pass away before they can get a place. Why do they have to wait for more than 3 years? And why can you not be more flexible? So how about allowing HCCs to take care of them? And you've been saying that it's very difficult. Well, given the fact that you're so smart, why have you been so rigid? And also for HCCs, well, you're only paying them $20 an hour. It's lower than the standard minimum wage. Well, for aging in place or aging in a community, in fact, we've been increasing resources, and the number of places for residential care homes has also been increased, and 5,000 additional subsidized places will be added, and 3,000 would be offered on the basis of residential care vouchers. So 3,000 would be done that way, and 2,000 would also be coming on stream. And just this year, we're talking about 1,171 places. Bureau Director, can you give us a pledge that is next year when we ask again about the waiting time and how many would pass away before they get a place? So can you guarantee that no elder would pass away before they get a place next year? I cannot give you that pledge, but then we'll try to improve the situation as far as possible. And also dealing with the problem at source, you talk about aging in a community. Yes, I'm sure you know, because recently we also went to the Welfare Services Panel, and we said that we would be giving this carers subsidy. Well, it's very similar to the HCC concept. So, so long as you're from a grassroots family, and if there is a woman taking care of an elderly family member, then she'll be able to get this subsidy. Yes, I understand that you've been working very hard, but then you have not been able to catch up with the need of our community. We have an aging community. So my question is, next year, can you guarantee that in 2014, no elder would die in the course of waiting for a residential care place? No, I can't guarantee. I think you've been speaking like a recorder for 6 years. It's been with us for 6 years. Please be quiet. Chairman, I hope that the Bureau Director will seriously answer our question. I understand. Yes, sir, Raymond Wong, please wait till I finished. Yes, I think we have a rapidly aging population. In particular, as one housing official said, so the entire territory is treated like an elderly zone. So for elders waiting for a few years, they have yet to get a place. So many of them will just die. I understand the difficulty of the administration, but then you will have to come up with interim measures. Or time's up, you will have to wait till the next round. Next. Raymond Wong, you don't have any sympathy at all. You are not human. Just now, Madam Chen asked you, and I asked the same question for 6 years. 5,000 people die every year. So my question, reply number 0267 is about OALA. All right. You've to spend $40 million on the means test. We asked you to do away with that, and you did not agree. All right, OALA, and then OAA, and then CSSA. You spend a lot of money on means testing those applicants. So what kind of government is this? What kind of people are you? I've also asked this. Well, you said that 2014-15, only 1,000 plus more places for the nursing homes and also care and attention homes, but then 5,000 people die in the process of waiting. And then in your opening statement, I'd also like to criticize you. Well, Matthew Cheung, I've been criticizing you all the time. I would always take the opportunity to criticize you, because only then will we be able to air the grievances for the elderly. Well, every day I'm faced with them, and I dare say that I've been one of the members who've been working a lot on helping the elders. You said that this term of government is determined to deal with the root problem of poverty. All right, this is problematic. If you're not able to resolve the root problem of poverty, you're trying to deal with the root problem of poverty. What are you suggesting? So what do you mean? What's the root problem of poverty? And secondly, how are you going to deal with that instead of resolving it? So these are the root issues or root problems. So what are the root problems of poverty? So can you answer this question first? Chairman, this term of government attaches great importance to the issue of poverty. But what are the root problems of poverty? So this is a very important statement in your statement. So the current term of government is determined to tackle the root problem of poverty. So what is the root problem of poverty? What does that mean? Can you be more specific about this before I move on to the next question as to how you're going to deal with it? Please answer the question first. Well, for the poor families, they are faced with financial problem and employment problem and also elderly poverty. All these issues have to be dealt with. But how are you going to deal with them? So is that the root problem? I think the root problem is the gap between the rich and the poor, and you are biased in favor of the rich. And also when it comes to poverty alleviation, you haven't done your job. So these are your faults. In particular, you are not doing your jobs properly. All right, you've already finished with your questions. Next. Whose turn? Leung Kwok Hong. Chairman, I'm really angry. You said that you can't put out a near fire with the distant water. So do I have to wait till I'm 65 or 85 and then I'll meet you in hell telling you that I've been suffering for more than 10 years? I think your policies are simply wrong. You're asking the NGOs to do it. You said that I've asked them to build a hospital and so on. How about the other homes? You just demolished them without making good use of them. And why don't you just ask them not to run a hotel? And then for the all right, for a son applying for housing, so you have the housing society has the largest number of units. So why are you still saying that distant water cannot be used to put out a near fire? And the administration is not short of funds. So the easier thing to do is, well, please ask your question. For elders, they cannot afford to wait. For example, for those unemployed young people who are not getting education and so on, well, yes, they can afford to wait, but then for an elder, he cannot afford to wait. So you should have spent more money because you have the Bot Place scheme. All right, in Sek Chai Lang, more than 1,000 places there, and now you are demolishing them. So have you rehoused them? Have you relocated them?
You're not giving them land. Do you have a question? The question is whether he would adopt my proposal. Whenever you demolish or cancel a hostel, you should compensate with two. I'm telling you to regulate the private homes where you buy places. You've got the law. Why can't you do something to regulate them? Why don't you increase the allowances for carers so carers can take care of the people in need? If you do not have land, give out more money. This is the way to govern. In other words, if you can't find land to build homes, you should give more money to subsidize the carers. Do you want the secretary to answer you? Well, I don't need him to replay his tape. I say different things, but he is like a tape recorder. Can you get $10 billion more to upgrade the homes and then buy places from them? Are you sick? Elderly people can't wait. Are you going to burn them? Underground money. I should give you some hell money. I should be throwing it at you, but I don't have hell money on my person. Why you should not just recite and rehash your points. If you say 10 billion is not enough, get 20 billion. We have all the money in our coffers. I can give you 10 rubber stamps and allow you to do this. Listen to me. Give out money if you do not have homes for the elderly. Elderly people cannot wait. You understand? They cannot wait for land to be identified. I think you are 63 yourself. 2 years later, you can get the allowance also. I'm not saying you will die, but are you going to get $30 billion for the elderly programs? Save and rescue Sek Chai Lang. What are you going to do about it? My constituents are crying out foul. There are 28 cases in my file. Your time is up. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. I'm also asking about home services for the elderly. In his speech in para 4, the secretary says there is an increase of 950 subsidized places, but you have 1 million people over 65, and 10 odd years later there will be 2 million people who will be over 65. I think this is a race between the tortoise and the hare. Elderly people are increasing in number, and homes are not catching up. Can you win the race, Mr. Secretary? We already have a backlog. The question is, can you let us know whether you are confident you can catch up within 10 to 15 years? Thank you for the question. We understand there is a keen demand, but we must be clear about the policy. We want to promote aging in place, and institutional care is just a backup, because we hope that elderly people can age in place, and we must develop two kinds of services in parallel. But of course, we need to increase home places as well. However, please look at the big picture. In the last 2 years, we have increased so much resources already. First of all, we are going to provide a lot more support for home care. And in fact, we are providing vouchers as well. And very soon, we will be reaching the target of 1,200. At the same time, we are going to provide more places in homes. Just this year alone, we have funding for 950 more. And in fact, in this financial year, we will be having an addition of 1,150, and in this term of government, there will be a total of 5,000. In the long term, as I said, we have the special scheme to use privately owned sites for welfare users, and we will be able to provide 9,000 places on 60 sites. I'm not talking about the number of places. I'm talking about the pace of development, and that is the increase in number of elderly people and the increase in places at homes. Are they being matched? No matter how many places you are going to add, if you cannot catch up with the increase in the number of elderly people, there will be a case of supply being short of demand. But you must know, not every elderly person wants to or has to live in an institutional care. This is because in Hong Kong we do not provide sufficient aging-in-place support, and therefore we have to try to improve it, but at the same time we also increase institutional care. And at the same time we are going to start an overall planning for medium-term and long-term elderly services. But of course we are not going to sit with our arms folded in the interim. I'd like to thank the Finance Committee for approving $10 billion injection. That has been pocketed already. It is now in the Lotteries Fund for infrastructural projects. And that will allow us to provide 7,000 places, including daycare, rehabilitation, and elderly services. This is a big step forward, but we know that we are going to work harder. But you have not answered my question. Can your figures prove that the increase in home places will be faster than the growth in elderly population? To be frank, I think he has answered you. But I think he is saying that maybe we don't need that kind of growth rate for home care services. Well, but that is only the ABC for providing elderly services. Okay, you are entitled to your own views. In the first round, we have allowed all members to speak. Now we enter the second round, 3 minutes each, including a reply. Mr. Teng Ka-Piu. Thank you, Chairman. I asked 3 questions and 2 have not been answered, and that is 068 people on CSSA but living in private housing. Some of them use the CSSA in order to pay their rent, and the rate is going up from 51% to 56%. What are your measures to tackle this particular phenomenon? And then 284, and that is the public transport concession. Can it also cover Kai toll service? I understand Kai tolls are licensed by the TD, and also their fares are regulated. The example quoted was from Po Toi Island to Stanley. The Commissioner is here. Can I please ask you to comment on the Kai toll service between Po Toi Island and Stanley? Are the fares regulated? Because elderly people live in these 2 places. Secretary, about rent paid by CSSA recipients in private housing. We know the problem. That is why we have added 6.5% to rental assistance for CSSA recipients. We know that market rent has gone up, and therefore we have revised it. And also under the CCF, you understand that there is a small subsidy for these people. There is a one-off relief from the CCF. Commissioner. Chairman, Kaito service does not belong to the mainstream ferry service. Its frequencies, operating hours, and fares are not regulated by us. It requires a license to operate, but we do not regulate the operation as such. That is why, can you not include them in the regulatory regime? Well, we see these Kaito services on the TD website, and also in certain places, this is their only external transport link. So why can't you include them in the concession scheme? Chairman, if we also have to regulate Kaito service, we will have to change the operating mode of the operation, and we must talk to the operator. Have you heard me say, Mr. Secretary, that this is the only transport link? Chairman, I think we'll have to look again at the overall operation. As you know, the concession scheme has been in place for some time. We will do a review at the appropriate time. But basically, the principle must be clear. We have to look at the frequencies and the fares and whether they are regulated. That is a basic factor. Mr. Chen Chi-chin speaking for the first time. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask about the waiting time for CNA homes, and that is question 59. If you look at 2012-13, applicants have been increasing. But why is it that in 2013, why is it that fewer people have been given a place compared to 2012? The number has dropped from 4420 to 4166. And you talk about withdrawals. Was it done on the initiative of elderly people, or were they deleted from the list because the SWD found the applications problematic? And then for those who passed away by 2013 or next year, I believe there would be more people dying than those being given a place. I think this is so miserable. Director of Social Welfare. Chairman, withdrawal. These are done on the volition of the elderly people because of different reasons. For example, family members or mates will take care of them, or they may have other kinds of support. As for the differences in number of places at CNA homes, I'll defer to the Deputy Director. Every year, the number of CNA places available depends on vacancies found at RCHEs. And again, that would depend on the people moving in and out of these homes. Why is it that in 2013, fewer people have been allocated with places compared to 2012? It should be increased instead of coming down. The number of places will be different at CNA homes from year to year. We will be adding places in CNA homes every year, but sometimes elderly people do not vacate the homes according to the same pace. However, this is a big problem. Fewer people, 300 fewer people have been allocated places in 2013 compared to 2012. And also, did you ask why elderly people withdraw their applications? Sometimes when we assign places, elderly people will have to be subject to another assessment, and sometimes they would be assigned to another queue. The application date will be kept. They have not such a good physical condition, and if instead of RCHE they may have to wait for a CNA home, and actually sometimes family members will be able to take care of elderly people, and sometimes they just put in the name to see how things go. Well, Secretary, you said that if elderly people are not choosy, how quick can they get a place in the best scenario? In the best scenario, within a few months. If they are not choosy at all, within a few months. Okay, next one. Second round, Helena Wong. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to ask a question 146, please. And also question 60 about domestic violence.
So since June 2010, the administration started to run this VSP, Victim Support Program, and so you've offered $5 million and about 800 service places will be offered. And this is for battered spouses and also battered cohabitants, and also people waiting for litigation and so on. So you're providing some help to them in the interim. And according to the figures provided during the past 3 years, yes, there were 800 places, but then on average about 500, 600 users would be using the service. So you have not been able to use up all the quota. And in Raymond Chan's question, well, in terms of the number of domestic violence cases dealt with by the SWD and also the number of lovers, well, there were some 5,196 cases in 2013. So there are many such cases. So you have dealt with more than 5,000 cases every year. So how come you only have 800 places and yet every year you've only been able to have 500, 600 users using the services? Is it a problem of publicity or so on? Is it that it's not able to offer concrete help? That's why people are not willing to use them? So I'll try to answer, and then my colleague will supplement. For 800 is the target, and also only those who are pending litigation would be eligible. And for others using our services, many of them are not in the course of litigation. So how many of them are involved in judicial processes? Well, I'll ask Mr. Lam to supplement. Well, as the Bureau Director just said, with regard to the VSP, is for people who have already started the judicial process and they are in need. That's why they will take part. So sometimes they refer to us by the court in terms of mood control, and also in preparation for the court procedure, they have to be psychologically prepared. But how many of them would be entering the judicial process? So half of them. Well, the figure can only be provided by the judiciary. Next, Peter Zhang. Thank you, Chairman. I'll give the time to the Director to answer the question. $460 million, and also with increased manpower, how are we able to monitor the work? And reply 111. I asked the question, and that's before December 2013. What's the number of people on the waiting list? 5,200. So I'd like to know, well, for the institutions without the queue or without the waiting list, then, well, they have underestimated the service demand. So I'd like to know what the SWD can do to remedy the situation. Director? First, on the lump sum grant and also the breakdown on the total, well, an increase of funding by $470 million, and there are 4 constituents. Number 1, that's the central administrative support, about $160 million, and then secondly, about supervision, $130 million. Third, allied health professionals, $130 million. And then for the rest, miscellaneous, well, you talk about food costs. What about institutions that do not offer food care? Well, for example, insurance and other miscellaneous expenses that would also be covered. That's why for all the NGOs, they would also have this item of miscellaneous. That's why altogether $470 million. As to how that would be distributed, tomorrow we are going to have a more detailed briefing, and the institutions have been invited to join. With regard to central administration and supervision support, well, we agree that for the larger organizations, they will have to increase that by a lower margin. But then for the smaller organizations, the increase rate might be higher. But then when it comes to the actual amount, that might also be smaller. So in terms of central administration and also supervision support, well, if you look at the lump sum grant system, all the institutions will benefit. With regard to allied health professionals, well, mainly we are talking about those with actual need. We expect that at least 77 institutions will get the additional funding, and for the other spending, whether it's for food or other expenses, well, for the 164 organizations, all of them will benefit, and tomorrow we have a more detailed briefing. So we will give more details to the sector. With regard to the centers, after the resources have been allocated, in terms of our management, from time to time, we have spot checks and other checks. We also believe that the organizations are working very hard to enhance their service. In terms of manpower support, we'll be talking to them. Next, Leung Yiu Chung. Chairman, I'd like to talk about elders with hearing impairment requiring residential care service. Well, sometimes they would live in those homes alone, and they have no contact whatsoever with their fellow housemates, because they can only use sign language, and the other friends do not know how to use sign language, and even with the staff, they have difficulty communicating with them. And in terms of facilities, it's even worse. For example, well, let's say if there is a fire alarm, but then with hearing impairment, they would need an alarm light. And when they are not feeling well, the nurses are not able to communicate with them. Well, for people with hearing impairment, not all of them can write, and therefore they are not able to tell you what's wrong with them. So please do not place them in one home on their own. You will have to make sure that they have peers staying together in one home. That will also help reduce their sense of loneliness. And you just said that you will be increasing resources for that. So I'd like you to be more specific as to what you're going to do to cater for their needs. So in terms of the quality of service, how can you improve that in order to meet their needs? Bureau Director, let me say a few words on this, and I'll defer to my director, because he has first-hand experience about the operation of these homes. Well, for elders with special needs, in allocating a place to them, if they have special needs, in fact, the SWD colleague will pay attention to that, so that as far as possible, the staff who will know how to communicate in sign language, so that they can stay in a more appropriate environment. And some of these homes do have these fire alarm lights, but then not all of them are equipped with that. That's true. But then as far as possible, we will try our best to help this elder with special need. I'll defer to Mr. Lam. Well, before you answer the question, can you tell us, well, in allocating them to these homes, can you make sure that they will be concentrated in one home instead of scattering in different homes? Yes, some of these staff might know sign language, but then if they live there alone, then they will have this sense of loneliness. So I have friends who live like that. So please do make sure that they would not be there alone, so that at least a few of them will be staying together. Yes, in doing the assignment or the allocation, we'll try to do that. But then, Bureau Director, can you tell us which homes are you referring to? Do they include private homes? Because for private homes, the problem is even more serious. Well, the SWD cannot regulate private homes. But then, as far as possible, we'll try our best to do whatever we can, and Mr. Lam will give you more details. Well, for care for the elders in terms of in particular residential care, we'll try to look at their needs, and for those with hearing impairment, as far as possible in our allocation to those residential care homes, we will try to allocate a few elders so that they can stay together in the same home. But then in choosing the homes, some of them might be choosy about the district, or they might actually prefer a particular home. So it depends on their own wish. But then if they do not have specific preference, and if we notice that in a particular home, if they've already got some elders with hearing impairment, then our case manager will remind the elder or seek or consult them to see if they would be willing to go into those homes. As regards the staff of these residential care homes, through training, we'll try to make sure that staff will be able to take care of elders with different needs. Okay? KK Kwok asking in the first round. Chairman, I have 3 questions for the administration. 1. Reply number 79. All right, Bureau Director, in your opening statement, you talk about reserving extra resources for people with disabilities and their carers. Looking at the waiting time for moderately mentally handicapped, well, it increased from 79 to 83 months from 8 onwards, and then for the severely mentally handicapped, 51 months to more than that, and also for all the other institutions, the waiting time has lengthened. There's been no improvement. Some has actually doubled. Bureau Director, I think the administration is cheating the parents, because every time when they come to file complaints with us, well, basically they feel that they are out there on their own and they are there to fend for themselves. So the figures have got worse. You talk about making improvements in certain areas, but then for the increased places, actually you're not even able to meet the increased demand. And also, we also have many mental patients who are children and students, and many have behavioral problems. And some are autistic children, and many parents with these children have come to us, and the services offered by the SWD has far from able to meet their needs, and many parents have to rely on the SWD because school support is next to zero, and the Education Bureau is at a loss as to what it's supposed to do, and then the Education Department is doing nothing at all. And then for these autistic children and also for students with learning difficulties, well, the HCCs are not able to help them because they have not been trained for that purpose. And therefore, for the autistic children, they need some places. Well, even if the parents are very skilled, sometimes they will have to attend to other business, and therefore they will need people who have been trained to take care of them, or social workers will be required. Well, for the HCCs, they are not able to help at all. So these parents are having a lot of anxiety. How are you able to help them? Well, on residential care places, I've already answered that before. I'll try to supplement on that. Well, during this term of government, there will be 6,200 more places. Yes, I know that. Well, you're not able to meet the new demand. So within the next 10 years, there are many coming on stream, and you're not able to help them. Well, yes, we understand that, but then we do have the medium to long-term plan, and we have this special scheme for privately owned sites for welfare purposes, and 8,000 places will be available, and 6,000 will be day training, and some will be for children, whether or not it's preschool or children training and so on. So it's a basket of measures so that in the medium to long term, that would also be able to help with the waiting time and also the pressure. As regards preschool, autistic children and so on, well, the CCF, we have already decided to regularize it. So by the end of this year, some $53 million of recurrent funding will be made available, so that from 0 to 6 years old is the prime time, and if we can intervene early, then before they can get a place, then they will be able to get some self-sufficient services or self-funding services, and $2,000 will be made available to the parents on a monthly basis, so at least they can get some help beforehand. Well, Bureau Director, do you know, well, for the $2,000, well, for occupational therapy, it will cost you $800. If you get, well, for the amount of money that you give them, that would only be enough for 3 classes. So have you thought about that? Well, for that money, we're talking about 1 year. So we're talking about $2,000 a month. But then for a class, it costs you $800. Have you been to Hip Hong Wui? It costs you some $800 for a class. So do you know that? Next, Ann Chiang. Well, Bureau Director.
兒童發展基金
I'd like to talk about the Child Development Fund. I was involved, and I understand many friends have also joined a matching scheme under the Child Development Fund. We think that the matching scheme is quite meaningful. It has a good rationale, and the operation has been basically smooth. But we believe it can be expanded, and the age limit can also be increased. And in fact, many people are asking whether the CDF can include children up to 18 years old and starting from birth, actually. And as I proposed earlier, could we also set up a baby fund? I think that would be even more meaningful, because we are not giving subsidies only for extracurricular activities, but for the money to be used when it is most needed. I raised this with the Secretary before. Have you considered it, Secretary? Secretary, thank you, Ms. Chang. Thank you for your positive assessment on the CDF. We also think that it is quite a good scheme. Therefore, we are going to inject $300 million into the CDF so more people can benefit. The quota of 6,000 now is small, I agree, so we are looking at expanding it. You said that we should expand it. I believe there is room to do so. Now we are serving children from 10 to 16. But if you say we should expand it to 18, then it means that the children are quite grown up already. But I think your proposal is a good one. Thank you, Secretary, for agreeing to look into that. And also, I have just heard from other members who spoke on elderly services. My question for you is, in fact, I'd like to confirm the figures. Now, when you buy places from private homes, how much do you pay for each place? It depends what kind of places you are talking about. The price is different for the urban area and the NT. You are talking about bought places, right? If you buy a Savanta place, it is different. It can be $12,000, and if it is CNA, it can be as much as $15,000. Normally, it would be $9,000 for urban areas or $8,000 for NT. This year, we are going to inject $150 million into the scheme. So there would be better quality of service because they can hire more people, and the average is $8,000 to $9,000. Well, if that's the case, Secretary, if you are talking about paying over $10,000 a month, then if we hire a domestic helper from outside, we are only paying $4,000. If I allow this to be done, if I give them $4,000 each while they wait, so they can hire an FDH, this is a kind of temporary help. It would be so much cheaper, isn't it? Will you consider making it more flexible? Actually, elderly people waiting for institutional care can still get daycare service. And as I said, we are going to introduce an allowance for carers for the elderly, because there may be women in grassroots families who have to stay home to care for the elderly. They will be given $2,000, and if the elderly person is also sick or disabled, the carers will get $4,000. Ms. Alice Mack, second round. I'd like to repeat my second question just now. The director misunderstood me. I was not talking about 138 places, and how many of them are NCSC in question 180. We understand those are civil service places. I'm just talking about how many NCSC places are there in your department, and whether the NCSC will have priority in filling this 138 civil service posts. Director, let me clarify. I do not have the figure for NCSC staff in the department, but the number should be going down. They can all apply for positions in the SWD, and we are going to be open and fair in treating their applications. If they have worked in the SWD, certainly they will have the relevant experience, and they will have an advantage at interviews. We will consider them as any other applicant, but given the work experience, I'm sure they can do better at interviews. But as to the actual number of NCSC staff, I can go back and look for the number. However, it must be going down. Director, I need the number. We have been saying that we should reduce the number of NCSC staff, and we want to know where they will end up. We have always asked whether they can get priority in joining the department. You have the PCSSA and also the OALA. I know frontliners are having a very heavy workload. If the frontliners can be helped by experienced staff, it would be better than you to get new hands and then train them. It will be easier for the applicants as well if your staff are experienced. Now that I have the time, can I ask the Secretary this question? You talk about women welfare in your speech. You say there will be $30 million to support women and also the Commission on Women. You say there will be a survey. I'd like to know whether the $30 million will also cover the survey. Yes. Now, would that be too little because you want to promote the welfare of women and also the capacity building mileage program and also to subsidize other women programs? Thank you. The $30 million is exactly to cover the components you mentioned, and there will be a dedicated fund for each. For example, the survey on work hours of women, and also there will be about $7 to $8 million in recurrent funding for the capacity building mileage program, and altogether that would amount to $30 million. This it is too small. It cannot reflect the emphasis you place on women welfare. Mr. Ma Fung Kwok, first round. Thank you, Chairman. I did not have any questions originally, but I'd like to follow up on what the Secretary said. Question 83 and also the question by Ms. Anne Chang. The administration is saying that there are elderly people who are not given an institutional place, but you provide HCCs or daycare services. Why don't you improve the system? You only give about $2,000. If I have a job with SMW and if I get $8,000, should I stay at home and care for the elderly person, or should I hire an FDH? Because your $2,000 will not achieve that purpose. If I do not have an FDH, how can the elderly person go and get daycare service? And also, if they use daycare service, they are using resources as well. So do you intend to improve the service so that those who need will be able to hire an FDH? Maybe you give them $50,000 a year So they have a choice. Either they hire an FDH or the carer will give up the job and stay at home so that they can get other welfare services. I think that would be more realistic. You have to pay $14,000 for a place and almost $200,000 a year. And in fact, that can amount to hiring 3 FDH. So 3 more persons can age at home. I think that would be more flexible. Now the service is neither here nor there, and it is quite inflexible. And by doing what I propose, you can shorten the waiting list. Secretary, Mr. Ma, in fact, we have discussed the rationale behind your proposal. But then daycare service is not that it can be provided by the FDH, because we are talking also about occupational therapy or physiotherapy. Well, yes, but you need the rehab bus to take the elderly person to the centers. Well, now it is very flexible. We have the community care voucher, and we are almost reaching the target. It is very flexible. They can have therapy done at home or at the centers. And in the centers, they can have social interaction with other people and use equipment for therapy. Yes, I understand this will help elderly people, but elderly people have to go to the centers. Well, we are having a multi-pronged approach, and it is very flexible. Last year, we introduced the vouchers, and it is user-based. In the end, the elderly person can decide what service to use. If they need a meal on wheels, if they need cleaning services or PT, they can choose. And the $2,000 is a subsidy or allowance for carers for elderly people. There are grassroots women who are not working. They are staying at home to take care of elderly people, so they give them this kind of allowance. They have already given up their job. This is not to replace the CNA service. However, there are people who may be willing to give up their job. What about these people? We have a pilot scheme, Mr. Ma. The the elderly care subsidy for carers is a pilot. We have to wait for the results. Dr. Fernando Zhang, second round. As the Secretary said, we have a multifarious kind of service, but people have to wait and nothing is provided on a sufficient basis. The carer allowance, it doesn't include the disabled, and there is a quota. Ms. Chang, don't think that they are so benevolent. There will just be 2,000 people who can get the carer allowance in the coming few years. But how many elderly carers there are in Hong Kong? Only 2,000 within a few years will get that kind of subsidy. It's a laughing stock, isn't it? Look at homes for the elderly people. A few thousand elderly people die while they wait for the service every year. And KK Kwok has named all the services for the disabled. They are waiting on end. Elderly people can't wait, we say, and children can't wait. We are talking about a golden period between 0 to 7 years. We talk about early intervention, early identification, but none of that service is enough. We talk about early education and training. We talk about special centers for the children and IP at KG cum CCCs. You say there will be an addition of 1,400 places in the coming 4 years, but then 6,000 people are already waiting. You also say the CCF is going to help. As KK Kwok said, one class will cost you a few $100s, and only 2,000 odd persons will benefit from the CCF. And everybody will be subject to an asset test. Children cannot wait. What kind of measures do you have to help the children who are already identified to have a special need? They have a disability. You have the slogans, but not the service. What do you intend to do? Secretary, 2 points. Just now, Dr. Zhang said that there will just be a quota of 2,000 for a few years vis-a-vis the carer allowance. No, but the pilot is going to run for 2 years only, and we will review the effectiveness after 2 years. And then we'll decide on the way forward. And Dr. Zhang also talked about carers for the disabled. We will take care of that when we do the review. If we want to regularize the service, we may also think about expanding it. We'll do that at the appropriate time. You talk about children with special needs. We know that. That is why we say the objective of the CCF is to help grassroots families.
Next, Chen Yunhan, asking in the second round. Bureau Director, I'm going to ask a very familiar question. All right, according to our census, well, we have potential women workforce, something like 2 point, so about 500,000 of them. So you're trying to attract them to rejoin the workforce. Well, Alice Mack asked you this question. 181 is about children from 3 to 5 years old, and a total of 300,000 are there. Well, but then looking at the figure is interesting. Yes, you have also listed out childcare, all right, subvented childcare centers and so on, and HCC and so on. So all of them 100%. So you're talking about aided standalone CCCs. So you think that all of them will need it. But then it should not be confined to these. It should not be just 30 or 32 places. So you should have a policy to monitor the situation. How come you're only increasing the number by 32? You talk about unleashing the manpower. All right, we're talking about some 500,000 people, and a very large number of them are taking care of children and elders. And out of them, we're talking about these kindergartens. And if you need to increase them, you will have to increase the number of places very substantially, so that such workforce can be unleashed, and that would also help our community, which is short of manpower. So after these women have given birth, they need to take care of their children, but then they can also go out to work. All right, Mrs. Carrie Lam said that a plan would be run to help them. So my question for the Bureau Director, is it that you are short of resources, or is it that the administration does not attach importance to women? Well, the Bureau Director has openly said that, all right, well, Chen Yunhan, you've proposed this, but then you're only offering $20 for the HCCs. All right, as a part-timer and as a volunteer, that's not going to work. So I've taken this up with the Bureau Director and the Permanent Secretary. We've been meeting one another on a regular basis. So Mrs. Carrie Lam said that you will have to unleash the manpower of the 500,000 women, and we've already given this proposal to her. And yet this year, you can see that nothing is done. Well, even for the subvented or aided CCC, you're only increasing the number of places by 30. So why is that the case? You've used up all the time. Well, I didn't remember that I only had 3 minutes. It's very simple, as the director just said. Well, for KG CCCs, yes, we have 20,000 plus places, and 77% has been used, and still we have a lot of spare capacity. A large number of places have yet been taken up. All right, over the years, you might say that we have not increased the number of aided standalone CCCs. In fact, there are a lot of spare capacity in the KG from CCCs that can be used. But then next year, if you still are not able to increase the number, then what happens? Sorry, you have to give him time to answer. Next, Chan Kin Po, asking for the first time. Well, paper number 62, well, it from 2011 and to 13 for spectated spouses and lovers. Well, from 2011, we're talking about the number increasing from 3,174 to 3,836, and increased by 850. And also for child abuse, it also went up from 887 to 963. Why has there been a deterioration? Will there be any follow-up action taken by the administration? And also for elderly abuse, have we seen similar increases? And you've provided a lot of home health service for them. So have you assessed their performance to see if it's been useful? And also reply number 63. Initially, I would like to look at the efficiency in dealing with CSSA applications. You said that more posts will be created. But then you said that more posts will be created. But then that depends on the actual increase in number of applications. I'd like to know for one-way permit holders, have there been any increase in the number of applications for CSSAs? So can you see a rising trend? And as a result, you will have to create more posts to cope. I would also like to remind you that for the Social Security Staff Union, they've said that the pressure is already bursting to the seams. So you have to note if there is any need for increasing such posts. All right, I'll defer to the director. Well, for domestic violence, well, in 2013, yes, the figure has gone up, and we are concerned about this, and we are actually finding out the reasons. We will have to analyze the situation carefully. But then this year, we've stepped up publicity and education and increase awareness. Well, many people would be prepared to come forward to report. In the past, they would hide it, but now they are more prepared to come forward. That's why the number would go up. And then for the services run by these institutions, we believe that they have done a remarkable job. We welcome this, and they've also offered a lot of help by running shelters and also by providing more information. So they have provided a lot of services that can meet their needs. I'll defer to the director for details. With regard to domestic violence cases, yes, there has been increase, and we have also set up a committee with the police to follow up on this. And one of the things that has been done is that we have stepped up publicity and education, whether it's by the SWD or the institutions or the police. And in terms of the services, they are also more targeted. That's why, in terms of the vigilance, that has been increased. That's one of the reasons. And also looking at the increase in figure, we are also very concerned about this. In fact, in the past, in terms of our support for the victims, whether or not it's the support for the victims and also for the betterers, we have enhanced our support. Well, for the victims, we have also introduced this victim support program for victims of family violence, and the institutions have helped us. And for the betterers, we need to have a more long-term program. But then by the end of last year, we also introduced this program. In fact, many betterers are not willing to join such a scheme. That's why we have rolled out some new schemes. For example, we have also got this anti-violence program. So through publicity and education, we hope to do a bit more. With regard to one-way permit holders applying for CSSAs, we've been monitoring the figures very closely. For the time being, we haven't seen an increasing trend. But then, as we just said, as the CFA ruling was made last year, that's why for applicants with less than 7 years residence, yes, the number of applications has gone up, and we are monitoring the figure closely. All right, we have two more members who have just joined us, asking for the first time. Priscilla Leung. Thank you, Chairman. I'd also like to ask this. Well, all along, we have been following up on this. That is for full-time carers. Well, just now, some members have said that we'd like to encourage more women to rejoin the workforce, but then some working women, in order to take care of their family members, for example, if they have some members in the family who have had an accident, whether or not they are elderly or not, they will need a full-time carer, and they would choose to quit their jobs, and then they will stay home to take care of their family members. And as a result of that, they will lose one source of income. And I've also visited some families with such backgrounds, and some women are of the view that they like to take care of their beloved ones, and they don't want to leave it to foreign domestic helpers, because they think that they are better placed to take care of their own family members. So how are we able to help them? Well, these are women with a full-time job, and then all of a sudden, because of their family needs, they have quit their job. They have proved to show that they used to work full-time, and some actually are senior government officials, and some of them have to quit their jobs because of that. So do we have policies to take care of such situations so that they do not have to quit their jobs? In overseas countries, well, they have policies to cater for their needs. For example, they can quit their jobs for 2 years, and then afterwards they can go back to their role positions, and if they have been doing well, then their employers would encourage that, and in some cases after they have quit their jobs, they don't intend to go back again. So would they be given this subsidy? Because 2 years ago I went to the SWD with some women groups, and I suggested that in such cases they could be offered about $4,000 a month as a family subsidy, but then they will have to come up with proof that there is a need for them to quit their job in order to take care of their family members. Bureau Director, thank you, Ms. Leung, for your question and comment. We are focusing on elderly carers. We have this pilot program. We hope to introduce that in the next quarter. So 2,000 carers for the elderly would be getting the subsidy, and if they have spent 80 hours a month on taking care of the elders, then they can get $2,000, and if there are 2 elders, then they can get $4,000. And the purpose is that, yes, they are taking care of their elders, and that's why they are not able to work, and then the elders would also be getting a lot of help. But then these are needy families. That's very important. That's why we have to have the means test. Given the fact that this is just a pilot program, we haven't tried it out, and therefore we should give it more time to see if we should extend that to other areas. So that's a starting point. Well, I have a question for the Bureau Director. Yes, for elders, yes, we will support that. But how about other family members? All of a sudden, they need full-time care. For example, they might have had an accident, or they may not be an elder, but then they might have had a stroke. So will they be able to benefit? Well, at this stage, as we just said, we are focusing at care for the elders. But then if there is any untoward incident happening to a family, then the SWD will be prepared to help. It depends on the family background, of course. I hope that the Bureau can consider this. Because we're talking about full-time carers, there are family members who need their care, so can you relax the criteria? Thank you. I'm sure the Bureau Director has noted your point. Next, Ellen Leung asking for the first time. Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to discuss with the Bureau Director in your opening statement, para 25 and 26. 25 is about the HCC. Well, many of the HCCs, or people who have to send their children to the HCC for care, well, some mums have told me that there are problems, and I'm sure the Bureau Director is aware of that. Well, you're talking about different welfare agencies, and when they run such programs, they would have different requirements, different arrangements. Well, $20 an hour. Well, some would have to provide meals as well, and you have no idea as to what is provided to the kids. And sometimes they would arrange with their parents, and they would send their children back, and then they will have to add these. They will have to increase the subsidy for these HCCs. So have you thought about this? Well, should you regularize this? Well, according to some HCCs, they told me that if you're prepared to offer them with a standard minimum wage, then they would be prepared to be more flexible. So that for children under their care, that would also be good. So would you say that for different welfare agencies, their HCCs should be offering the same menu or the same diet, so that the parents will have a better idea as to what their children are eating? And then in para 25, you also said that for 2014-15, in 2014-15, you're going to enhance the Neighborhood Support Childcare Project, but then what you're going to do is just about 200 places. So, Bureau Director, I'm sure you would know. Well, some pregnant women said that they have to get registered for this HCC because after their maternity leave is over, they will have to go back to work. So there is a serious shortfall in places. As Fernando Jiang just said, you have a bit of everything, but then you're short of everything. So you are not able to resolve the problem at its source. So in many areas, you are simply running out of places. So how are you going to respond to my question? And Para 26 is about after-school care. Again, there is a shortfall of places. Many moms have told me, and they're actually in tears. They said that, well, they can get the service for one term, school term, and then they'll be denied it in the following term. All right, you talk about the LIFA, and then so what happens if they can get it this term, and then next term they can't get it? So you will have to give time for him to answer the question. You only have I have 5 minutes. No, just 4. Thank you for reminding me, Chairman. So you have to answer the question. Well, for the HCC, for the 234 additional places, basically, if there is a need in the district, then we would encourage them to increase the number of places. In many districts, they have already exceeded the quota. As you can see, well, in some cases, they have 140 places. So if there is an actual need, we encourage them to be more flexible.
But then there are 2 categories. One is home-based, one is at the center. So we give them the flexibility. As for fee charging, we would act according to the spirit of neighborhood help. It is half volunteer work, but half subsidized work. So it is an entire package. In other words, the community will support the households. You talked about after-school care centers, etc. First of all, we are going to strengthen the service. Can I please finish my answer? In every district, we stipulate that there must be centers which provide service until 9 o'clock in the evening, and they must be open on Saturdays and Sundays and also holidays so that their parents can still work. We are going to ask for $400 million injection from the FC, and $200 million of that would be for supporting extracurricular activities together with the business sector. So it will be a great help for the grassroots families. This is about after-school care. I think time is up for today. The next session will start at 5 o'clock.